Hello everyone, welcome back or welcome to the channel. This is part 2, last end of the 300, Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BC, the fight for Greece. We stopped it there, a little commercial, sponsor, ad, and they're about to get into the fight. Not really much to say, but you can click that thumbs up button. For me, that helps out tremendously. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like. And if you want to donate to the channel, you can do that through the thanks button. You can request a video. If you do, your name will be sponsoring that video. You don't have to donate to the channel. You can still request videos. It just takes a little bit longer to get to. And I don't really mention your name. I just say this was a requested video. This one wasn't. I just saw it on my feed. Let's get into part 2.
Xerxes' vast army arrived at the battlefield 4 days before the first blood of battle. In that time, Herodotus famously relates how a Persian scout spied the Spartans calmly combing their hair or working out near to the Phocian wall. On asking his advisor Demaratos what this was all about, the exiled Spartan king signaled this was a Spartan battle preparation. Though bizarre to the great king, the wearing of their hair long was actually a privilege granted on reaching manhood, alongside the more famous donning of the red cloak. Preferring this style due to the belief it made them appear taller and thus more imposing in battle, it's little wonder then that Xerxes' spies sighted the Spartan homoi meticulously combing and oiling their locks. During this lull before the storm, Xerxes also sent another envoy to the Greeks to lay down their arms, to which the Spartan monarch laconically replied in true Spartan fashion, "Molon labe, come and get them." This impertinent reply may have finally spurred Xerxes into action. Given the disparity between the numbers of each host, and likely learning a larger Greek force had already dispersed on the rumor of his might, the defiance of this meager army may have astonished and angered the great king in equal measure. It's likely his delay had been to merely await the dawning of reality on Leonidas and his doomed comrades. With no meek withdrawal forthcoming, the King of Kings ordered his Median and Kissian forces forward to clear the way. As intended, the superior numbers did little to tilt the scales of fortune in Xerxes' favor. Of course, no small amount of bravery and determination also aided the defenders. Another factor to success, however, was the way in which the Greeks fought. Xerxes, by attacking this way, was allowing the Greeks to fight the battle their way, spear to spear, eyeball to eyeball. The Greek style of fighting, common to all the levy citizen soldiers of the Polei, was the phalanx formation, the tight and near unstoppable mass of men, shields and spears that was ideal for defending the narrow terrain. Factor into matters the hoplite soldier's panoply. A man would wear the Corinthian-style bronze helmet, while his torso would have been covered by his wide aspis shield. Bronze greaves protected the lower legs of the combatant, while on the offensive side of things, the long spear, of around 2 to 2.5 meters long, outreached the average Persians. Further protected by a coat of bronze or linen, in contrast to the average Persian assailant, it's little wonder why Leonidas's allied army was so deadly over those 3 days of bloody melee. The Medes and Kissians would mostly be equipped with a smaller spear and a wicker oval-shaped shield in the main. Most Persian infantry would also wield a composite bow with a quiver of iron-tipped reed arrows. In addition to the usual double-bladed dagger, the typical sidearm of the Persian, the more fearsome battle axe was also a mainstay. Of these weapons, the bow was undoubtedly the national weapon, so to speak, and even a symbol associated with the Persian kings. Indeed, in previous conflicts, masses of volleys were often used to clear enemy formations, yet on this first day at Thermopylae, Xerxes' melee-focused approach had led to severe losses. Part of the Greek strategy ahead of the wall was to feign retreat, only to quickly halt and turn on their pursuers. This rapid escalation of hopes and collapse of progress must have taken its toll on Persian morale, alongside the mounting bodies of their comrades. By keeping the battle a mobile affair, Leonidas was also cleverly mitigating the deadly effect of the Persian archers, denying his foes a fixed target. Having beaten off this first series of assaults, Leonidas must have thanked the gods that Xerxes impatiently ordered his best men forward to engage in the later afternoon. Perhaps the king appreciated that his army was still relatively fresh. Better now than to face Xerxes' elite when wounds and weariness were worse for his men. The Immortals, as the Greeks named them, were no joke. Mostly made up of native Persians, along with smaller numbers of Medes and Elamites, these elite professionals presented the best Xerxes had to offer, while within these 10,000 so-called silver-butted infantry also marched the so-called gold-butted elite within an elite, 1,000 of the noblest and bravest of the Immortals. Known as the King's Spear-Bearers, but also colloquially referred to as apple-bearers due to the golden-shaped butts of their short spears, this innermost personal guard of the great king were formed from the noble class, the other 9,000 picked as the cream of the commoners. Led by Hydarnes, in the event, despite their own fearsome reputation and on paper outnumbering the entire Greek force that day, the Immortals could not dislodge Leonidas and his comrades. Having fought off the initial waves and then Xerxes' best, Leonidas may have allowed himself a brief window to hope that his army could hold indefinitely, or long enough for Xerxes to rethink his approach. The second day of fighting was similar to the first. The great king's men fell on the Greek formations like waves upon a rock. However, as in nature, so too with war. Over time, though relatively fewer in number, the Greeks inevitably took wounds and losses, the solid rock of defense inevitably slowly eroding. Herodotus informs us that the Greeks fought in relays, so that much, if not the majority, of the hard fighting must have been done by those non-Spartiates present. Perhaps then, Leonidas held back at times in grim respect for his allies, though undoubtedly at other times the 60-year-old monarch would have been in the thick of things, in true Homeric style. This period must have been frustrating for Xerxes. Likely observing events from an elevated position, his numbers and threats had done little to advance his cause. What he really needed to change his fortunes was decent local knowledge of either an alternative route into mainland Greece, or a means to clear the obvious route in front of him. Enter one of the more infamous traitors of Western history, Ephialtes. A local man from Trachis, Ephialtes, hoping for a suitably grand reward from the great king, offered to lead enemy soldiers along the mountain path that would allow Xerxes' men to take the Greeks in the rear. Leaving nothing to chance, Xerxes sent all of his Immortals with Ephialtes, their only block en route being the unseen 1,000-strong Phocian contingent. Herodotus indicates all the remaining Immortals made the march, which means the guardian army of Greeks must have been heavily outnumbered many times over. Having marched through the night, Hydarnes and the Immortals closed in on the Phocian position. Equally shocked, the Immortals loosed their arrows. The Phocians, though brave, mistakenly believed themselves to be the intended target of the Persian elite, and retired to some high ground to exact a bloody price for their deaths. In response, the disciplined ranks of the Immortals merely bypassed them and continued towards the east gate. Leonidas learned his fate was sealed with the coming of deserters in the night, the news of the Persian maneuver being confirmed by his own lookouts just after dawn. Taking counsel again, Leonidas sent the majority of the remaining Greeks away, electing to remain with the 300, or what was left of them, as well as 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans. On the surface, modern audiences may wonder why Leonidas, faced with such a hopeless situation, didn't simply withdraw all his army and fight another day. According to Herodotus, the Spartan king had his own reasons for remaining himself. According to the oracle at Delphi, either Sparta would be laid waste, or a king of Sparta would fall. The Persian pincer would close on Leonidas and his remaining men between 9 and 10 in the morning, though unsurprisingly, given the difficulty of exactly coordinating such an action, Idernes and the Immortals were late in coming up the rear. Unlike on the previous days in which the Greeks fought in relays at the narrowest point of the middle gate, Leonidas now moved his position forward to contest the Persians in a wider area, the better to fully deploy his remaining forces. Advancing in good order at first, as the Greeks closed with the Persians, the latter's volleys must have undoubtedly done some damage. Breaking with normal custom, Leonidas then ordered an all-out charge, and it was now that desperate fighting broke out, the king himself at the forefront. By quickly advancing on a wider front, the arrows may have inflicted less damage than otherwise. Conversely, the Persian losses were said to have exceeded those of the previous 2 days. It was around this time that Leonidas likely roared his last battle cry and fell among many of his comrades. A furious battle over possession of the king's body now ensued. The surviving Greeks ferociously pushed back the Persians 4 times before they regained possession.
Did the Spartans know that he keeps calling him Leonidas, and I've always known him as Leonidas, but either way, did they know that he died, or did they just continue to fight until eventually? Because they're doing a hell of a job.
The sheer desperation of the last fighting was related to by Herodotus, writing that when Greek spears were broken, they wielded their swords, and when they too were lost, they resorted to using their hands and teeth. Despite this last grim success, however, the inevitable loomed with the final approach of the Immortals from the rear. Upon realizing the time was near, the Greeks withdrew through the Phocian wall and redeployed on a hillock to await their final fate. At this point too, the Thebans' resolve finally broke as they broke off from the Spartans and the Thespians, fleeing towards the Persian lines. Many were slaughtered in a blood rage, though most offers of surrender were taken. These fortunate men were later branded with Xerxes' mark for their troubles. With the Immortals also finally upon them, the Phocian wall breached. The enemy decided to wisely finish those surviving Greeks with a storm of arrows. So ended the battle at Thermopylae. With the fall of Leonidas and his rear guard, Thermopylae began its long history as arguably the icon of the famous last stand. However, though the battle cemented the Spartan legacy in the pages of history, their glorious last stand would have been of limited comfort to the inhabitants of Locris, Boeotia, and Attica. Xerxes would not soon forget Leonidas or his estimated 20,000 losses at Thermopylae, and would exact appropriate retribution. Athens was burned, though its population had been evacuated. At sea, the free Greeks were far from vanquished. Though defeated at Artemision, they scored a decisive victory at Salamis, which forced the withdrawal of the Persian fleet back to Anatolia. As for the great king himself, he returned home too, leaving the bulk of his land forces to finish business in Greece. Alas for Mardonius, the would-be satrap of a conquered Greece, his star would fall soon after. Gathering the largest army seen up to that point, nearly 40,000 hoplites, Spartans included, the Greeks defeated the Persians at Plataea, freeing themselves from the threat of Persian subjugation for good. The defeat of the Second Persian invasion of Greece did much to foster a wider ethnic and cultural sense of Greek identity as contrasted with barbarian folk. In Athens especially, the conflict was framed as an ideological struggle, the Greeks representing freedom over tyranny, a view of the conflict that largely persists in the Western public consciousness down to the present day. Shout out to War Thunder again for
That was interesting. I mean, good. I had heard that there were more than 300. And then I was told, well, there were thousands of people, and then it broke down to the 300. But I always figured that, I'm going to call him Leonidas, because that's what I know. I always thought that he survived till like close to the very end. Which he did. I mean, granted, he wasn't in that final retreat. But I'm guessing that remaining group that had the arrows fired on them, I'm pretty sure they were all just slaughtered. This group right in here. I'm trying to point to it, but let me go back. Yeah, I'm sure all these people were just slaughtered then. Was good? Okay. Well, if you have any other interesting battles in history and stuff like that happened, throw it in the comment. I love doing those. All right. So, until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.